how do you feel when you're talking to someone that's wearing a pair of glasses that you're not 100% sure whether they're actually paying attention to you or watching something or recording you? And I remember having conversations in exactly the same tone a number of years ago when Apple were rumored to be bringing out a watch. I remember having the same conversations a number of years before that when Apple were rumored to be bringing out an iPad. Before that, having the same conversations about Apple bringing out a phone. And
Hello and you're welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler, in association with Square. Square can help you look after your business needs, from payments to menu management to online ordering. Visit square.com for more. Now, what's the next big thing in tech? A lot of people think it might be Apple's new headset, set to be announced in June in a few weeks. But can Apple make augmented reality a success where so many others have flopped? Well, to talk about this today, we're joined by Stuart Miles, who's a journalist and the founder of the price comparison widget, Squirrel. Stuart, there are a couple of things we're expecting. One in June and the other a couple of years away. The one in June is going to be, we think, an AR/VR headset, right?
yeah, so there's been lots of rumors circulating for a long time. Apple is keen to get into mixed reality, AR, VR, and the rumors have kind of got to a point now where we think that they're actually going to become a reality, no pun intended, and they're going to announce something at their developer conference, WWDC, in June.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear here, because the term Apple headset and Apple glasses are bandied about a lot, there are actually two separate things that are discussed in this conversation. One is what you've just alluded to, which is this AR/VR headset, which we're going to talk about in a little depth in a second. The other are what's known as Apple glasses, and that is seen as something that's a few years away, right?
Yeah, so I think the kind of end goal for anybody that's in this space at the moment is to create a pair of sunglasses that, instead of just augmenting the sun, actually augment the world around you. And so they look like a pair of glasses, but they offer a host of information, could even replace your phone in the future.
Okay, look, let's talk a little bit about this mooted augmented reality or virtual reality headset. And I'm going to ask you about it in a second, but I'm going to quote, if you will allow me, from Mark Gurman of Bloomberg, and he's the person who's always out in front. He's always quoted by all the news agencies, and he seems to have a few really good inside tracks. Now, I'm just going to quote what he has said about it, if you'll bear with me. This is what he says. Here's how it will work. The headset will have several external cameras that can analyze a user's hands, as well as sensors within the gadget's housing to read eyes. That allows the wearer to control the device by looking at an on-screen item, whether it's a button, an app icon, or a list entry, to select it. Users will then pinch their thumb and index finger together to activate the task without the need to hold anything. Core features will include advanced FaceTime-based video conferencing and meeting rooms. And the headset will also be able to show immersive video content, serve as external display for a connected Mac, and replicate many functions of iPhones and iPads. And then he goes on to talk about the device having maybe a digital crown, the kind of thing that you see on the AirPods Max and the Apple Watch, and that it'll be able to switch between VR and AR. What does this sound like to you? Does it sound attractive, interesting?
It sounds like a barrel of laughs, doesn't it? No, it's. I think if we're about to spend a lot of money, which is what they're estimating this will be around about $3,000, just to make a FaceTime call, that's going to be quite a niche approach. The general consensus from the rumors, and I have to keep on stressing these are rumors, is that it will look like a pair of ski goggles. And you immerse yourself. So a combination of sort of Ready Player One style aesthetics, mixed with Minority Report kind of pinch to zoom functionality, with a lot of technology that we've already seen in that VR space. Some of your listeners might have experimented or played with the PSVR2, which was Sony's VR headset that came out in February, and that has eye tracking, and other VR headsets have had eye tracking to allow you to be able to reorientate yourself within the space that you're in, and things like that. I think it's interesting that you're trying to. The VR space has been going for quite some time, and we haven't found that kind of killer application, so to speak, that must have app that allows us to make this a must buy. Now, they've tried in the past. It could be that in that example that Mark's given, that it replaces having multiple screens because you work on your laptop, and it creates multiple screens around that laptop to expand the real estate that you've got. It could be that Apple lean into their Apple TV viewing, Apple TV Plus and their movie experience, and try and create a kind of a cinema in your home, and so you just sit on the sofa and you watch, instead of having a big TV in your living room, you just put the pair of goggles on and you watch movies.
Yeah,
that could be one way of doing it, but again, it's trying to find the use case. And I remember having conversations in exactly the same tone a number of years ago when Apple were rumored to be bringing out a watch. I remember having the same conversations a number of years before that when Apple were rumored to be bringing out an iPad, of like, well, I've got a laptop. Why do I need a thing to sit on the sofa with and stuff? And I remember even before that having the same conversations about Apple bringing out a phone and what would that do. So I think it's, they've proved in the past that they are good at delivering new sort of ways of interacting with our technology, even though that market is kind of not saturated, but there are a number of players that have tried that space already, and also having the ability to give it time for those areas to those apps and those applications to kind of surface and be created.
I mean, one of the key differences surely here is that when Apple launches something, it does so prepared with an idea of all sorts of applications. So we understand, for example, if you're to believe all of the rumors and all the reports, that it will launch with its own app store for things like games, video streaming, communications. But to your point about maybe the surround cinema experience, Gurman has also reported that Apple has been in discussions with companies like Disney, for example, with which it has quite a close working relationship anyway, and that it will be updating its own Apple TV Plus material to work with the headset. So I guess the question then is, even if it does that and launches with an app store with these apps, are we ready fundamentally to get over the thing that has mostly stopped us wearing VR and AR headsets, which is that it is like a clunky pair of ski goggles that you have to wear on your head?
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I think if you look at, just before I answer that question in full, there's a sense of Apple have been very good in the past of educating us how to use things without us realizing that we're doing that. If you look at their MacBook range, the trackpads got bigger and bigger and bigger, encouraging you to use your fingers to interact with an interface more and more. And then, oh, here's an iPhone. Oh, here's an iPad. So, and you're already used to using this kind of, your finger around the display and things like that. I think if you look at some of the technologies that they've trailed over the last 5 to 10 years, there has been a lot of push from augmented reality apps through the iPad, through the iPhone. You and I have both been to a number of Apple keynotes where they've kind of, oh, look, here's a dissecting frog, or here's looking at this on stage, or here's doing this. And, you can start to see that spatial audio for, listening to music will also play a big part in any VR headset that comes along.
And they also have the collateral products like the AirPods and the AirPods Max, and they've already made those.
Yeah, and it's kind of looking at ways that, phones have become commoditized in such a way, and this is perhaps more, something we should talk about, the Apple glasses, but, phones have become commoditized so much that technology is moving so fast. The Chinese manufacturers are producing phones almost once a quarter now rather than once a year, and selling it for such a cheap price that, Apple's probably looking at it, sitting there thinking, well, we've got to find the next sort of sector to move into, because we have to keep moving. Because otherwise, if we just stay as just predominantly relying on all our revenue coming from phones, then we could end up being like BlackBerry or Nokia. I think the big barrier to entry for VR has been this kind of, as you said, this clunky headset that you've got to put in. We're a very sociable sort of race, right? And we like, visual stimulus from everywhere. I remember a number of years ago going out for dinner at this restaurant that was in pitch black, literally pitch black. You couldn't see anything. The waiters were all blind. And you it's fun for the first 5 minutes, and then you realize that half of the experience about eating is actually looking at your food and about looking at the people in front of you and taking all those visual cues.
How can you take a photo, Stuart, if it's
exactly
dark?
So it's things like that. I think that will be one of the biggest problems to solve. Having used the PSVR 2 recently, back in February, it was an amazing experience. That immersiveness into games like Horizon Call to the Mountain and Gran Turismo and things like that were really immersive and incredibly sort of exhilarating. But after about 20 minutes, you are kind of realizing that you just need a bit of fresh air. And so that will be one of the bigger challenges.
Well, Apple has a quasi-answer to that, if you're to believe some of the other reports, because the headset's FaceTime software, supposedly, will realistically render a user's face and full body in virtual reality. So that's different to what Meta does at the moment in the metaverse. And those avatars will allow two people, each with an Apple headset, to communicate and feel like they're in the same room. So Apple is clearly, it has a nod toward what you're talking about with stimulus and stimuli, and it thinks it can go some way virtually towards reproducing that in a way that Sony, PlayStation, Meta, Oculus, and the others can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's that balance, isn't it? When you go to the cinema and you've watched, gone to the latest, seen one of the latest Marvel movies or something, and you come out with this dark room for the last 2.5 hours or whatever, you kind of feel a little bit drained. And if you think about it from a technology point of view, we're so used to spending so much time, rightly or wrongly, on our technology that if you want someone to sit and work in their laptop for 8 hours, that's fine. You can get away with it because you can quickly look around and kind of refresh your eyes and refresh your stimulus. But if you're so immersed, I think that's one of the challenges that they'll have to face, is making it not feel claustrophobic or, just sort of this brightness in your eyes for that length of time, because we're just not used to that at the moment.
Now, something you said a moment ago, and we're looking ahead a few years now to the next Apple product after this, which is incredibly cheeky because we don't even know for sure that this one is coming out yet. But it's widely reported that Apple's teams are working on a pair of Apple glasses, which you described early on in this podcast as getting closer to a regular pair of glasses or sunglasses with augmented reality abilities. And the way that you described it, I think, is the way that maybe Apple might be thinking about this as a replacement for the iPhone, or certainly the next or a next big platform that it can own or dominate. It's a really, really big ambition, isn't it?
It is. It's a big ambition from a technological point of view, because at the moment you've got to have a processor that's powerful enough but small enough. You've effectively got to take the phone and put it on a pair of glasses, which are a lot lighter than a phone, and so you've got that element there. But then once you've solved all the technological aspects of battery life, of how do you put a battery into a glasses frame and not make it incredibly heavy? Do people that don't wear glasses, are they happy to wear glasses because you've added enough element to that? But then once you've solved the technological point of view, which you could probably say is the easy part, because given enough time, there'll be advances in batteries, there'll be advances in all of these things. You've then got to get across the social element of how do you feel when you're talking to someone that's wearing a pair of glasses that you're not 100% sure whether they're actually paying attention to you or watching something or recording you or things like that. And we've seen that with devices like Google Glass, which is quite old now. I mean, that was like 2013, 2014, something along that time. So 10 years old. It didn't cotton on. I tried them a number of times, felt really uncomfortable in myself wearing them, knowing that what I was looking at could be recorded, or how people would react to me when I'm wearing a pair of glasses that, doing that. You've seen that with Facebook and the Ray-Ban collaboration
Very, very
recently.
much so. That was a big issue with those glasses.
You
People
know,
wondering whether you were taking photos or recording them, or whether your attention was otherwise diverted from talking to somebody.
And I think we've learned that certainly over the pandemic and Zoom calls, and perhaps shouldn't admit this, but presentations that I've sat in where Zoom calls on in the background, and you're just like, okay, nobody's really looking and paying attention to me, so I'm just going to carry on emailing. And then you suddenly realize someone saying, Stuart, it's like, oh, sorry,
I think I was on that presentation, Stuart.
yeah, exactly, completely drifted off.
Yeah.
So, from that perspective, it's the and I think that's probably why you'll see Apple launch an AR VR like headset that's perhaps bigger and clunkier than they did, partly because the technology isn't there yet to make those glasses, but also to try and then spend the next 5 to 10 years educating us about using glasses, so that as they get smaller and more refined, it becomes something that's, oh, this is obvious, rather than that abrupt social jump in, which we've seen failed from Facebook, failed from Google, and even other companies like Bose who have tried to create, headphones within glasses and things like that.
And to be fair to Apple, in as much as the company ever aids softly discussions around this quietly, and I don't think they do, but if they do, there is a sense that they are tempering expectations here. They're not nobody is suggesting in or around the discussion around these AR, VR headsets or glasses that this is going to fly off the shelves immediately, partly because of the price. That the expectation is maybe they might sell 1 million of these in the first year, which by Apple gadget standards is actually a very modest figure. By anybody else's standards, it's pretty good, but by Apple standards, it's pretty small. But I'm reminded of things that you mentioned, the Apple Watch, for example, which a lot of people laughed at when it was launched. It is now by far the best-selling watch of any type in the world.
Yeah, I think what Apple are really good at is having patience, and patience to be able to slowly build a product over a number of years, acknowledging that they're not pivoting, because that's kind of perhaps too aggressive, but tweaking and refining the product as it goes along. If you look at Apple Watch, that you and I were there was a big, strong play on this. Was a luxury product. It was kind of, that there was a kind of a big focus that this would, it was trying to play that. They quickly realized that people loved the fitness element to it, and it kind of changed direction considerably. That gold model that was 10, 20,000 pounds, whatever it was, got dropped, and it moved there. If you look at Apple Maps, again, when that launched, it was pretty shocking, pretty basic. It was kind of what we'd call an MVP, a minimum viable product. And now, Apple Maps is actually, a pretty good mapping solution for people. And the same with like Apple TV. It feels like the Apple TV Plus, launched with 2 or 3 shows. Everybody's like, okay, the morning show's great, but there's not much else to watch. Now it feels that almost it's Apple TV Plus is almost there. There's so many new shows that have got quite a bit of a depth and breadth to them from the catalog, that it has started to become a viable product. Might not necessarily be as good as Netflix or Disney Plus at the moment, but it's almost there. But that's taken them a long time, but they haven't kind of rushed it, hoped to be a massive success day one, and within 6 months they'll, oh no, it didn't work, let's move on. They kind of just let it build and slowly build, and then eventually you go, oh, okay, like, as you said, the Apple Watch is pretty much everywhere.
Stuart, thank you so much for explaining that. Stuart Miles, journalist and the founder of the price comparison widget a squirrel. And that's all we have time for this week. My thanks to Tabitha Monaghan, who produced today, to Conan Doherty on video, and Gavin Hennessy on sound. You've been listening to and watching me, Adrian Weckler, on Big Tech Show in association with Square, and I'll talk to you the same time next week. Bye-bye.